I shall be discussing the poem The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Robert Frost was an American poet, and he's highly regarded for his realistic depictions of rural life, and his work frequently employed settings from rural life in New England. Before we go into reading of the poem, just a line or two as an introduction what the poem is about. It is a poem about choices. It is a poem about decision making. Choices that we make have an impact on our future, hence, we need to think twice before making a choice. So, let's read the poem. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry, I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. The poet here says that he was walking in a forest. This yellow wood, wood means forest, so yellow wood means a forest with leaves which are wearing out and they have turned yellow in color. Now, when do the leaves turn yellow? Leaves turn yellow in the autumn season. Therefore, yellow woods implies forest in the autumn season. So, when he was traveling in the forest during the autumn season, he came across a fogged road. He came at a point where he could see two roads, one towards the left and one towards the right. So there were two different paths that he could see, and he had to choose one out of them. Now, here in the next line, if you see, and be one traveler. Be one traveler means as he was only one person, he could travel on one road only. So he had to choose one out of these two roads. So he says, he looked down one as far as I could. So the poet kept standing there and looked at the path very carefully as far as he could see it. Why did he do so? Because he wanted to know how the path was. That is why he looked far. So before taking the path, he wanted to know how it was, whether it was suitable for him or not. He was able to see the path till from where it curved, after which it was covered with trees and was hidden. So where it bent. So it was not a straight path till the end. Obviously, there was a turn, and he could only see the path till where it curved, and then it got covered with trees and was hidden. This is the literal meaning. But what does the poet actually imply? What is the deeper meaning? So the poet here implies, or the intended deeper meaning is that it happens in our life also when we have choices, when we have alternatives to choose from, but we have to choose only one out of them. So, what do? We take time to think, and what do we think? We think about the pros and the cause, the good or the bad, what benefits will we have, and in what ways can that particular decision harm us, whether it is suitable for us or not, and only then we take a decision on what path we should choose. So, this is all about decision making. So, the poet here is at a point in his life where he has a lot of alternatives, lot of choices, and he has to pick up one choice that would decide his future. Let's read the second stanza again. Then took the other just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had warned them really about the same. So before we go on to the explanation, it is important for you to understand a few words and phrases. Fair. What does the word fair mean? Fair means as good as the other. Claim means result. Grassy, the word grassy here shows that it was unused, and wanted wear also shows that the road had not been used. It wanted people to wear it off. So the poet here, he decided and started walking on another path. The first path was the one which he looked to a very, very far distance in the previous stanza, and the path had just bent. So eventually the poet decides and he starts walking the other path. Now, why did he start walking the other path? Because he felt that both paths were equally good, they were just as fair, or he wanted to be fair and make a random choice. Now, here these two are different meanings, and they will depend on the perspective of the reader. That is how you take the meaning to be. Whether the poet here wants to say that both the paths looked justified, or he wanted to be fair and make a random choice. But the result was that he decided to take the other path. And why did he decide so? And having perhaps the better claim. Perhaps means maybe, and claim means result, as I already told you. So the poet felt that the path would give him better results. Now, it was just his hunch, he was guessing, or whatever choice he was thinking on after pondering over for some time. The poet must have come to the decision that maybe the second path, would give him better results, as it had grass on it, which means that it was unused. Now, this is all a poet's perspective. It is the poet's perspective, and there is no generalization to it. It's not that everybody would have felt the same way. That is what the poet felt. So, the poet felt that just because it had grass on it, it means the path was unused. Not many people had walked on that path, and that is why the path was grassy. And so the poet deduced that maybe that path would give him better results. So the reason for the poet to choose the second path, the other path, was that because he thought that that particular path would give him better results, because it was not walked over by many people. But what does he realize next? Though as far that the passing there had warned them really about the same. After he walked on that path for some distance, he realized that Both the paths had been worn out the same way. Both the paths were similar and worn out. What does this mean? Sometimes the poet is saying that both the paths are looking similar. Sometimes the poet says that the other path was grassier. It means he says that both the paths are different. What does this show? This stanza shows that the poet was in a state of confusion. This stanza shows the dilemma in the poet's mind, that when he is looking at two choices, he is analyzing the pros and the cons, and he is getting confused here. Sometimes he feels that the first path is better. Sometimes he feels that the second path is better. So, this stanza clearly shows the poet's state of confusion. The implied meaning of this stanza is that even in our life, when we have to take a decision or choose an alternative, we also feel confused, right? We feel that the others might have better benefits, or the one chosen by us has disadvantages, problems, and challenges. We are confused. But the poet here decided to ward off that confusion and take the other path. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. The word here, trodden, trodden means walked upon. The poet says that both the paths were similar, equally lay. Laid equally means to him, both the paths seemed very similar that morning when he actually had to walk on the decided path. And why both the paths were similar? Because he saw that both had leaves on them that no one had stepped. And how could he say that no one had yet walked on that path? Because the leaves were still green in color. Leaves, no step had trodden black. See, when we walk on leaves, when in a forest or in a natural area, when a lot of people walk on the leaves that have fallen on the road or the path, the leaves gradually, by being crushed under their feet, under the feet of the travelers, they turn black from green. But at this point in time, when the poet was beginning to take the path, he found that both the paths were similar because the leaves had not yet become black. He decided that he would take the other path. Remember, in the previous stanza, the poet says, I took the other. And which was the first path that he left? Was the first path that he saw far off and turning. So he decided that he would take the other path and keep the first for another day. I keep the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way. What does that mean? He knew that when we take one path, that leads us to some other path, then other choices, maybe there are other forked roads. So one way will lead to another, to another, to another. And he doubted. He was in a doubt. I should ever come back. So when one way is leading to the other, then to the other, then to the other, and he doubted that he might never get a chance to come back and choose the first path. So he was very well aware of this, that he might not be able to go back on his decision. So, similarly, even in our life, once we choose an option, we must keep on moving ahead with that option, as we might never get a chance to come back and take the other option that we had left earlier. So, here, this stanza is emphasizing on the importance of decision making, making the right decision, because it might not always be possible for us to revert our decisions, to undecide something which we have decided. Stanza 4. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Words to know here: sigh. Sigh is a deep, long, audible breath, like hence. Hence means after. Coming to the paraphrasing, the poet here says that in the future, many years hence, many years after, he would say this with a sigh, that once upon a time he had reached a point in his life. So, here, two roads diverging in a wood refers to that point in his life when there were two options for him, and he traveled on that road which had been traveled upon by lesser number of people, less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So the decision he made, the choices he picked up, has made all the difference to his future. Here you see the word sigh. The word sigh I shall be explaining in the next slide. So, what is the implied meaning for us? That in future, when you grow up, then you would say that once upon a time when you were young, you had two options. Two options means choices, now, not essentially two choices, there could be many. So it is here symbolic. For example, you will soon come to a stage in your life when you have to choose your career. So you will have lots and lots of options and you will have to pick up one. So there you can identify yourself with Robert Frost, that you are standing on a forked road. It can have more than two tongues. So you will have to choose, you will have to decide. And the choice that you make will make you what you become in future. So the strong message here, that you should be wise and be careful. Like in the first stanza, the poet says, he looked far and long he stood. Why did he stand there for long? Was because he was thinking. He did not want to make a foolish choice. He wanted to make a wise decision and a careful, thought of decision while making the choices out of the options that you have in your life, because your future depends on the choice that you make today. In the last stanza, as I previously told you, the word sigh. Sigh is a very, very important word in the last stanza. What is the significance of this word sigh? The word sigh may signify a sigh of relief or regret. As the meaning was given previously, that sigh is just a deep breath, like so we might sigh when we are relieved, and we might also sigh when we are feeling regretful. What does the poet mean by sigh here? This is not clear. It could be a sigh of relief because whatever path the poet chose led to positive outcomes and therefore a happy life, and hence he heaves a sigh of relief. But it could also be a sigh of regret because the path he chose led to negative outcomes or did not bring the desired results and therefore resulted in an unhappy life. And the poet regrets making that choice. This is not clear in the poem. So, you as a reader can imagine the sigh being a sigh of relief because the poet is happy of his choice, or the poet is feeling regretful and he is unhappy of the choice that he made. So, this is up to the reader, that is, it is up to you to think whether the end result of the poet's decision was relief or regret. Thank you for listening. In my next video, I shall be talking about the literary devices or the poetic devices or what you call as the figures of speech. So, literary devices of the poem The Road Not Taken in my next video. Don't forget to watch. Thank you.